Sometimes this time of year, it can feel a little gloomy, especially after the holiday rush. Even those of us who embrace the chilly weather sometimes need something to break up a long winter. And one thing I love to do every once in a while is treat myself to a little something special. I don't want to spend a fortune on it, and that's where Quince comes in. With Quince, you can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price. Something everyone needs in their closet, in my opinion, is Quince's iconic Mongolian cashmere sweater, starting at just $50. You can also check out their Italian leather handbags, washable silk skirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. I paired my new black Quince cashmere sweater with one of their silk skirts for the holidays, and I got so many compliments. I felt great. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/bestofyou for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's quince.com/bestofyou to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/bestofyou. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Allison, and I'm so glad you're here to discover what brings out the best of you. This podcast is all about breaking free from painful patterns, mending the past, and discovering our true selves in God. I can't wait to get started as we learn together how to become the best version of who we are with God's help. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Best of You podcast. I am so glad you're here this week. This is a first for the Best of You podcast. It's the first time we've had a married couple on the podcast as they tell their story of how they came back from the brink of their marriage almost unraveling. And it's the first time we've really had an episode devoted to the topic of marriage. Whether you're married or divorced or single, this episode has something for everybody. And the reason for that is that my guests today have written a brand new book that is all about how the secret to a healthy marriage is in learning to manage yourself. And so this episode touches on so much of what we talk about regularly on this podcast, which is learning to manage our own emotions, learning to be more in tune with our body, more in tune with the messages we're telling ourselves, more in charge of our own responses to other people. And all that work is, in fact, the foundation for a healthy, long-term, two-way relationship with someone else. So in this episode, we're going to get deep into what my guests call the 4 pain cycles, the 4 ways most of us tend to cope when we feel threatened or hurt or fearful or controlled or even just annoyed with another human, and how it's our responsibility to learn how to shift from that pain cycle into a healthy response that honors the other person, but also reveals the best version of who we are in that moment. My guests today are just an incredible couple, Ron and Nan Deal. They've been married for 38 years, and they've worked for decades to bring wisdom and incredibly practical advice for couples everywhere. Ron is a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's a best-selling author and podcaster. And Nan is the co-founder of Connor's Song, which is a nonprofit organization founded in honor of their son, Connor, who died at the age of 12 in 2009. In this new book, The Mindful Marriage, Ron and Nan partner with pioneering therapists, Dr. Terry Hargrave and Sharon Hargrave, whose transformational restoration therapy has helped millions through the practice of emotional mindfulness. And they're applying that approach to marriage. The book is called The Mindful Marriage: Create Your Best Relationship Through Understanding and Managing Yourself. And that subtitle really says it all. The more we grow and heal and learn to manage our own inner turmoil and become the best version of who we are, we show up more effectively in our most cherished relationships. This is such a rich episode from start to finish. Ron and Nan share incredibly, honestly, and vulnerably about each of their own journeys and how there were periods of time where neither of them was doing their own work, and it really hurt the other one, and how they not only survived those rough patches, but learned to thrive as a married couple. And this method that they're laying out in the new book and that they share with us today on this episode is what helped them heal their own marriage. You will hear us talk about an assessment you can take to help pinpoint your own pain cycle, the way that you tend to react out of pain when you feel hurt by someone else. I took the assessment and we discuss my results in today's episode. If you want to take that assessment, it's free. It's at www.worthypub.com/assessment. I will also send that link out along with an excerpt from the book in this week's weekly email newsletter. It's free. It goes out every Tuesday. You can sign up for it at drallisoncook.com. And so without further ado, I am thrilled to bring you my conversation with Ron and Nan Deal. Let's dive into this because you're both very real and honest in the book, which I so appreciated, especially Ron, as you've worked with couples for years as a therapist.
Raising my hand to say, I need help too, right? I mean, that's absolutely our journey.
You've helped so many other couples, and yet here your own marriage was at a real crisis point. Could you take us back to that moment where, Nan, you really sat down with Ron and said, this isn't working. We've got to change. What was happening in your marriage at that moment?
Well, I like to go back to the beginning. I think we both brought in some real hard baggage to the marriage, and we didn't unpack it back then. And we really actually didn't know how much baggage we were bringing in from family of origin. And I honestly wanted Ron to fix it. And I think after he did go through graduate school and became a therapist, although I wanted him to fix it, and I didn't want him to fix it. I wanted him to fix it on my terms, when I wanted him to fix it. You know what I mean? And so I think we just brought in a lot. We brought in our pain, and we started unpacking that on each other, not knowing. There was a season, a decade or more, where Ron was really overworking. I would say he was a workaholic, and he was just... There were multiple times I tried to get him to see, or I tried to coerce him into seeing, or I tried to blame him or shame him into seeing this bad pattern of, it was never enough for him. It was always, he was just going after the next thing and the next thing, building this kingdom, so to speak.
Doing good things for God.
You betcha.
Good things.
You betcha.
That's exactly right.
Yes. And honestly, our boys were middle school and under, so I'd say they were 8, 10, and 12 at the time when it was like, wait a minute, they need their dad. These are young boys who are going to become young men, and where is Ron? Why are we always walking into church by ourselves? And why am I feeling so lonely on this side of the couch when he's gone all the time, or when he comes home, he's completely exhausted because he's given 150%. And so I had just had enough, and we had made a move too. And I thought the move would make things better, when in fact it made it worse. And so I met him one night with a suitcase, and it really wasn't a kindness. It wasn't even a carefrontation at that point. It was a, you get us some help or you're out of here. Or maybe I'm out of here. I don't know, me or you kind of thing. I was done. And in real desperation, he was like, okay, I'll get us some help. And that landed us into Dr. Hargrave's office the next day.
And Allison, I think a lot of people can relate to some of that story, just drift in their marriage and sort of wake up one day and go, wow, you're way over there. How did we get here? That was certainly us then. What we came to learn from Dr. Hargrave and the principles that we are now sharing with the Hargraves in the Mindful Marriage, what we came to learn is what was driving us underneath my working, underneath her loneliness, was far more important than the fact that I was just working a lot of hours. It was far more important to understand that, because what was driving would have continued to drive in all kinds of wrong directions. And we needed to get at that.
Yeah, the root.
The root.
Right.
It wasn't just about less hours. You had to get at the root of what was driving that.
That's right.
And in that office that day, let me just say, I met them both at the door, and I said, because I'm an early childhood education major, and I have this doctor and a therapist staring at me, and I said, "No funny business, you two."
I love that.
I'm like, none of this psychobabble stuff.
Yep.
And Terry said, "Well, by all means, go first." And he let me just unpack my pain. And then I like to tell people he turned to Ron and he really nailed him to the wall.
He did.
He really did.
He was talking to Nan. He was doing a reflective statement to Nan, but boy, he was talking to me.
And in that moment, I sat and I thought, yay, somebody's finally seen me and heard me. But the thing I didn't see, well, I saw it, but Ron starts crying. And he, at that moment, he starts a journey of humility. And yet I'm just sitting there in my pain and in my anger going, good. You just sit in that. You just sit in that for a little bit because you have been so awful to me. And I did not see his pain. I just was so glad that somebody else saw my pain and was calling him out on it, which was wrong on my part. So fast forward 2 years to when the bottom drops out and our middle son, Connor, passes away. We are back in Terry's office, just hanging on by a thread. And I will say this about him. I love him dearly for how he tenderly and gently stepped into that space and was just present for us. Just so grateful. Because I think because of how hard it was for us and how broken we were. I hate the stat that people throw out when people lose a child and they come at you and go, well, your marriage is in terrible crisis now. 95% of all marriages are going to end because you've lost a child. First of all, that's not true.
Not true.
But if you're in crisis like us, you could become a stat. And so Terry was God's provision for when this crisis and this deep, dark night of the soul comes on, that I'm thankful for those 2 years we sat in his office and worked. But I will say this about those 2 years. Ron starts his journey of humbling, and Terry turns to me that day and he says, Nan, this brokenness in you, if you'll allow God to heal it, it'll be the most beautiful part of you. And I sat there and I looked at him and I went, what? I've been trying to scrape this pain off my whole life. What do you mean, the most beautiful part? And it wasn't until 2020 that I understood that for the first time. Oh, this is what you meant. So this journey with him and restoration therapy and our journey of grief has been a long, windy one.
I appreciate the honesty. You said something really interesting, and I think this is so relatable for people. What you were upset about with Ron, the working all the time, the not being available, was real. It was valid.
For sure.
It was real. But you also said the way I was trying to get him to see that wasn't helpful. And so this is what gets tricky, I think, for people when we're in a marriage, when we're in a relationship. It could be a different kind of relationship where it's not that what we're seeing in the other person isn't valid. And then we hear kind of the tropes of, I need to do my own work, but he's the one with the problem.
You're right.
Yes.
And I think it gets into what you guys lay out as these reactive styles.
Yep, reactive coping styles.
This is where we kind of can lose each other as a couple. And it's a subtle but really important shift. It's not that we're trying to gaslight ourselves and say, well, he's just got to do him. I've just got to work on myself. There is an issue, but it's how we figure out how to come together in that. So that feels like such an important spotlight you're placing. And I want to dig into that a little bit.
Well, and two, if there's abuse, then there definitely needs to be safety.
Yes.
There needs to be boundaries. I sat with a woman just last week at a recovery meeting, and she was setting a boundary because her partner was doing drugs. And she asked me, do you think that was okay? And am I not showing forgiveness? And I'm like, oh, most certainly. Yes. You need to get to a safe place.
Yes.
I love that you're giving that caveat. We're not talking here about patterns of abuse or toxicity. We're talking about these are disappointments. Maybe the other person isn't really growing or doing their best. Maybe they are hurting us, but it's not in that category of abuse. And I really appreciate that caveat.
Okay, so let's get into that reactivity. First of all, this is the universal experience. Every person on the planet does it, anywhere from a couple of times a day to multiple times, if not constantly during the day. Dysregulation is a natural part of our life. It happens when somebody cuts you off on the freeway. It happens when your 2-year-old or your 16-year-old or your 25-year-old looks at you and says, I don't care what you say, you're stupid. And you feel that disrespect. Those are moments of dysregulation. When your spouse looks into their phone rather than looking into your eyes, and you feel that gap in where'd you go, that's a moment of dysregulation. What happens neurologically is our brain goes into fight or flight reactivity. Everybody's heard of that these days. We talk a lot about trauma, and you're an expert, Allison, at that. Fight or flight. Well, fight or flight really takes on 4 different expressions: blame, shame, control, or escape. Those are the categories. There's different things underneath that, but blame is basically that I'm against you. This is your fault. I'm going to point out what you did wrong. It's Adam and Eve in the garden. It's, somebody else's fault. Shame is it's my fault. And I'm unloading on me, and
there must be something wrong with me.
Yes. So it's not just the feeling of shame, it's the activity of shame. It's really putting ourselves in a corner and saying, this is about me. I'm not good enough. That's why you would rather spend time in your phone than talk to me. That's shame. Control is I'm going to take charge of the circumstances. I'm going to try to prevent this thing that's causing me pain from happening anymore. So I'm going to make it this. I'm going to tell you to do that. It's criticism. It's defensiveness, where I get to talk you into liking me better than you like me now. It's argumentativeness. That's what control looks like. And then escape is 20,000 things that you can run to that will numb you to your pain. So it's running into working all the time, or running into alcohol or drugs or porn or your kids, or, lots of things. Food, overeating, on and on, exercise, like all the things that we can just do excessively because we're running away from something. Now, some people are one of those 4, and as it turns out, some people do all 4 or a combination of the 2. Nan's
that
raising
would be
her.
me.
And, this is just the start of understanding yourself, so you can begin to take that part of you off and put it on, which is why we have an assessment now online that people can go online and do. And I know you're going to put a link in the show notes for that. And it's very eye-opening. In about 10 minutes, you'll go, wow, and that's me.
I found out as I've been on this journey that I did a lot of blame and shame when I was younger. I'd kind of vacillate between the two because I was in a very shameful home. And so I would blame the situation, but then I'd shame myself because maybe it was me. And I did a lot of blame, shame. Then when I got with Ron, it was like, well, I'm going to blame shame, but now I want to control you. And it wasn't till after our son passed away that, I can blame and shame and control, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back for me as far as the pain. And there was nothing I could do. And so I went to escape. And for a decade, I numbed with alcohol and prescription medication because it was instant. But I think the pattern was already established with the blame and shame and control. This took on a life of its own. And so I can still, though, in certain situations, find myself going, what are all 4 of these things doing? And why are they still here at the table?
Do you ever feel frustrated with bloating or bathroom struggles that you just can't seem to get a handle on? Whether it's feeling weighed down before a big event or those moments when your digestion just refuses to cooperate, it's hard to feel your best when your gut is out of balance. I have been there, and that's why I'm so excited to tell you about DS-01 Daily Symbiotic from Seed. I first heard about Seed when a friend recommended it for gut health, and honestly, it has been a game changer. DS-01 is so much more than just a probiotic. It's packed with 24 clinically and scientifically studied strains that support not only gut health, but also your skin, heart, immune system, and more, all in just 2 easy capsules a day. And honestly, let me just tell you, it really works. I noticed a difference in my bloating within the first 2 weeks, and I just feel lighter and better overall. Even after meals that used to leave me feeling stuffed and bloated and just weighed down, DS-01 helps me feel more comfortable and balanced. Plus, it's easy to make it part of my daily routine. I just take it every morning before breakfast, and it's as simple as that. Get ahead of the new year with a routine that helps you now by going to seed.com/bestofyou and use code 25bestofyou to get 25% off your first month. That's 25% off your first month of Seed's DS-01 Daily Symbiotic at seed.com/bestofyou. Code 25bestofyou.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Allison, did you get to take the assessment?
I did. I found it very eye-opening, and I actually had parts of me that were like, wait a minute. So I want to get into that. I'd love to get into that and let you guys dissect it a little bit for me, because I have one very clear one, and that I actually in many ways feel like is parts of me still can feel like, how is this hurting anybody? The escape one. So I want to get into that. But before we go there, I want to ask you, because you're saying something really important with these reactive styles. I'm going back to this, Ron's working too much. There's something legitimate there. You're maybe feeling, you're wanting to blame him. You're feeling shame inside. And what I notice in marriages, and I'd love for you to speak to this, is often it's not what we say to our spouse or the thing that we're trying to put our finger on. It's the place from which it's coming inside of us. So if I'm feeling shame, the way that I come at my spouse is going to come out of that shame. That shame is what's going to spill out of me when I get tipped over, as opposed to, and what sometimes I'll say to people, as you get healthier, you may be even more able to go to your spouse and be like, hey, what's going on with this? You might be more empowered to actually say, this isn't working for me, right? It doesn't diminish your voice.
Exactly.
In the relationship.
It gives you agency.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you have more agency to speak into the relationship from a position of calmness, from a position of strength, rather than dependence. See, that's the thing. If I'm leaning on Nan to finally act right, do right, so that my sense of inadequacy, there's my pain, that's what drove me to work all the time. I didn't know that. I just knew I worked a lot, but I didn't know why. But once I discovered my pain, inadequacy, that was driving my control, coping reactivity, I had to face myself with that rather than going, Nan needs to love this out of me. Which is what most of us do our entire lives, Alice, and I've become convinced of this. We spend our whole marriage saying, if you were more X, then I wouldn't feel inadequate. I wouldn't fight. I wouldn't get control. I wouldn't work too much. And the truth is, that's not accurate. You have something driving you from within that you got to learn what it is and take charge of it.
And believe me, I tried. I tried so hard to love that out of him or be what I needed to be for that.
And her.
And then all of a sudden you look up and you go, but he's still working a ton. Wow, that didn't work for me. And mine comes from abandonment. I have so much abandonment in my family of origin story. And with you, and I'm feeling abandoned by you. And so my abandonment, and then we lose Connor, and I'm feeling abandoned by God. And it's just this abandonment. And when his inadequacy and then that drive to work and travel and be gone and conquer and do for all the other people in your world taps into my abandonment, it is a nasty, ugly, I don't even want to call it a dance. It's just dysregulation. It's a cycle we can't pop out of.
Yeah.
It's such an important nuance, because we do need to speak into our spouses' lives. That is part of it, but we have to be able to do it from a place of, this isn't coming from my wounds. This is coming from my, I love you, and this isn't okay. Something's going on here.
Allison, we are dancing around Matthew 7.
Yes.
I mean, when you have, okay, what's he say? Judge not that you be judged. And by the way, the measure you give will be the measure you get. So when you stand in pride, looking at your spouse, saying, you're the one with the problems, I'm okay, but you're messed up, then what happens? They return fire. And now you have a cycle. So what does he say? What does Jesus say to do? Stop focusing on the speck in the other person's eye. Start dealing with the log in your own eye. And then what happens when you take the log out of your own eye? Then you will be able to help them with the speck. When I take agency over my pain and I manage me rather than expecting Nan to manage me, to fix me, to help me, to love it out of me, whatever I think is going to happen there, when I take agency over myself, deal with my own log, my own pride, my own issues, my own pain, I am in a better position to be self-giving toward her. It empowers my ability to love her at that point in time. So this is not about, I'm just pulling away and going to fix me and not worry about you. No. At the end of the day, it moves us back toward one another.
It happened last week. I'm getting ready to go to a meeting on Thursday night. And I asked him, I said, what are you going to do? I'm going to be gone for 2.5 hours. He's just worked a full day. He's had a long week. It's Thursday, The book's coming out. There's a lot, but, And he said, yeah, I think I'm just going to work. And I said, no, why don't you just watch something, bang 'em, shoot 'em up, something. You love that. Just get lost in that and give yourself a little evening. You work so hard and you should do that. And he, okay, yeah, I'll think about that. And then I left him to it because I thought, that's not mine to manage, but I can love you. Old Nan would have said, yeah, that's what you're probably going to do. And you do that all the time because all you can think about is work. That's that's the love of your life.
It.
Listen, I came home and I said, what'd you do? And he goes, I took the evening off for myself. And I was like, this is a miracle. In my mind, I'm going, God, did you just see that? And he's like, yes. And I didn't need your help. I need you to love him like I love him. And then you need to back away.
That's a great example of you were in that moment trying to love him, not control him, not blame him, not shame yourself. And it is so much more freeing and so much more powerful. That's an incredible example.
And I wasn't trying to get something out of it.
Yes. You genuinely left him to his own devices.
Genuinely for him.
And I can tell you, on my end, I immediately felt her compassion. And because, listen, I know the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, a decade ago, it would have been contempt and anger and
resentment.
Would I have been motivated at that point to take her suggestion? No, I would have said, I'm going to do what I'm going to do just to prove, and here we are against each other again, both dysregulated, both reacting at one another, and nobody is self-giving love. But when she came with softly and gently, and we've done so much work together, I knew where that was coming from in that moment. And I heard it, and I didn't think I had to do it. I wasn't being controlled by her. I had complete options, but it landed on my heart in a way that I could entertain it.
You know the difference. It's early on and I've shared with you a little bit, Ron, in prior conversations when I was dating my husband. He'd been married before his wife had died, and he was a widower. So he had a little more experience than I had coming in. And early on, I had, Nan, to your point, I had some of my own abandonment and attachment issues came to the surface that I tried to put on him. And he very early on would say, I don't think this is about me. And I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But he was right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something, because he said it so clearly, there wasn't a hook, there wasn't a blame, there wasn't a control. It was like, there's truth in that. And he is actually loving me in that moment, because I then had to go, wait, so if he can't solve this ache in my heart, I got to get to the bottom of the ache then, because this marriage isn't going to solve that. He can point me to, there's an ache there. I feel for you that there's that ache. I'm never going to be able to fill it. So if you think I am, that's going to set us up for defeat. And early on, that was just life-changing to me to do my own work. So I love that you're putting your fingers on this in the book. You do such a beautiful job through your own stories, through such practical wisdom on how to apply it. I want to talk a little bit about this assessment and encourage folks to take it. So I took it. I took the really short version and very clearly came out as someone who's in that escape. That's my primary go-to. I was just feeling so proud of myself going through. I don't try to control people. I don't try to blame people. I don't, really shame myself. Oh. And here's what's interesting about that one, and I'm curious your thoughts about this. For those of us who avoid conflict, who escape it, who there's a way in which we can tell ourselves, the only person I'm hurting is myself. I do it through disappearing. Nan, you talked about this in the book, disappearing into books and movies or, but not bad stuff. But I know when I'm just disappearing into a world of my own instead of wanting to face what's hard in a relationship. And it's taken me a long time to recognize, and I can tell myself I'm not hurting anybody.
Yeah. And let me just say, there's some things that are socially more acceptable to escape into.
Binging Netflix is,
Exactly.
Shopping.
Religiosity is something people escape into, and they call it being Christian. And really, they're running from their pain. They're still just running from something. So yes, some things have more negative consequence, drinking, alcohol, drugs, than other things do. That's not the point. The point is, what is this telling me about me? That is what we call chasing your pain. And that question has been life-changing for us, not just when our marriage came to a crisis, but every day since. If I'm driving down the road and somebody cuts me off and I have a few choice words for them, as if they could hear me, why do I do that? What is that? That's dysregulation. There's no thoughtfulness to that. It's just reactivity. Then I ask myself, I've learned to say, Ron, what is that telling you about you? What is going on with you right now? Why did it bother you so much that guy cut you off on the freeway? And that little question will lead to amazing insights and discoveries about what you're running from. And then I know what to do with it. I now know how to face it. I know how to move myself. We've mapped the peace cycle out of my pain, what I'm going to do with it, which the book helps outline for people. And so I'm learning the vulnerabilities in me, the issues in me, and I'm seeing what I can choose to do to put on my new self and not be that anymore.
I think with both control and for me with escape, what I was doing was defending my pain because I had found something that took the edge off, that made me feel better. It was a false sense of better. And it has to do, for me, with trust and trust in God. Because in this life, we're going to have trouble. We're going to have pains. We're going to be disappointed in relationships. Grief and loss are going to happen. God has to be the carrier for me. I had to trust him with my loss, with my grief, with my pain. He doesn't take it away. There are some things he has healed. He has healed our marriage. There are things in my pain he has taught me from childhood. But with this loss, he's not taking it away this side of heaven, with our son. But I can trust him with it to help me carry it. But I was the defender of that. I mean, boy, if one glass didn't help or 10 shows didn't help or 3 blouses that I bought or whatever the numbing is, it can be pornography, it can be food, it can be all kinds of things. That's me not trusting God to help him heal or help me carry or take on that pain and to learn from it. And so you do that for 10 years and you get further and further and further and further from what the truth is and further from the light. And that's what was happening with me. It's just I didn't trust him with it.
I got one more thought, Allison, and then I'd love for you to just respond to what we've been rambling about here as it relates to you being an escaper. Yes, sometimes you can escape into things that aren't really immoral or, causing great difficulty and whatever. And so you think, well, I'm the only one who's suffering here, so it's not a big deal. But the other thing I would say is, but what are the opportunities you miss as a result of not taking agency and facing whatever the pain is behind it? Mm-hmm. What are the things that you're having to give up? Yes, you're the one suffering. But are there other choices you could have made that would have brought about different things if you faced the pain rather than ran from it?
I love what you're both saying, and it takes me right back to the core of your book. And in my case, because I can be very autonomous, I can exist very sort of in my mind, in a way. This word that you talk about in our book, the us-ness, it's not only depriving God of the opportunity to enter in, but it's depriving your most significant relationship the opportunity to bear those burdens together or to bear the hardships together. It's intimacy. And I think that one of the things I love about your book that I think is so different is that you talk about how a marriage becomes its own entity. There's an us-ness that's its own thing that we have to nurture and nourish. And I love that because it takes it out of the 50-50 or compromise or negotiations. It's this thing that's bigger than me or my spouse. I need to nurture. And when I'm in avoidance or I'm in escape, I'm not nurturing that us-ness because I'm leaving somebody out of that. And I thought about this after I took your assessment, and I thought, one really practical way that I've worked through that as the Lord has tapped on my heart, it's actually you are depriving yourself and others of something when you refuse to walk into pain with others. My husband's very active. I could just curl up on a couch forever. He's very active. He loves to hike. He loves to be outside. He's, wants to be cross-country skiing, anything. And what happens is to nourish our us-ness, we do those things together. And I could tell myself I'm doing those things for him. But the truth of what's happening is the escaper part of me, the true self, the spirit-led self side of that is I love solitude. I love contemplation. I love to ponder. When we're cross-country skiing together, I get to do that in a far healthier way. When I take his invitation to us-ness and we're doing something together that I might not choose on my own, there's fruit in that for me. And I've discovered that. So suddenly I'm like, when can we go, hiking again? Which, and he's like, what?
Who is this person?
Not only because I want to be with you, but because the us-ness that we've created through establishing those rhythms is also good for me.
That's exactly right.
Did I say that well? And that's what I realized, that the us-ness invites me into, wait a minute, this hiding that I do actually can be redeemed into something that's more contemplative, that's more these things I want to be. And I do that far better when we're an us and we're coming together. And it's so much deeper than I do this for him, he does this for me.
Exactly.
Right.
And us-ness is like a baby. It's a thing you got to feed and care for and grow and nurture. And it's a living, breathing thing that you created on the day that you got married and dedicated your lives to one another. The word picture I would give you is the unity candle, only kind of not the way we do it. Normally people walk up and they grab their individual candles and they light the us candle, if we could say it that way, and then they blow themselves out, which never should you do in marriage. Marriage is not designed to blow you out. Marriage is designed for you to be able to thrive and flourish. But now there is this third entity that you both need to feed and care for and fan that flame. And by the way, that flame, as the us-ness grows and gets stronger, it feeds each of you individually. So all three candles are lit. That's the design for marriage. All three candles are lit. And your us-ness becomes that thing that it requires something of you to give to. Of course it should. You got to be self-giving to that, but it gives back. Here's my quick example, similar to yours. My wife was a runner for years and years and had a little injury, and she became a walker. And she's not a walker, folks. She is a walker. I can't hardly keep up with her. I've had knee surgeries, and now I'm doing better than I ever have physically. And I'm joining her. Guess what? Ron does not like walking. Ron gets tired. Ron gets sore. Ron can't keep up with Nan. But our us-ness likes walking because it's time together. It's conversation. I know it feeds her for me to be with her. It feeds me to hear her thoughts as she walks and talks. And oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And so, yes, I pay a price for the us-ness to be fed, and our us-ness enjoys it. Ron probably won't walk. If you left it up to me, I probably wouldn't do it. But together, that's something that really feeds both of us.
And I think your us-ness is going to ebb and flow and change and grow and look differently than it did ours 39 years ago. You're going to have seasons where it looks different. And so you've got to be a student of your us-ness too. We're empty nest right now.
Yeah.
So that's a different season. And we're grandparents. So that's a different season with our us-ness.
Yes, I love that. You have to be intentional about it at each of these seasons in your marriage.
And to tie it in with our previous conversation, when I am at my worst, when I'm bringing dysregulation and reactivity, blame, shame, control, or escape to our us-ness, I'm not feeding it. I'm not nurturing it. I'm not contributing to something that feels loving, stable, and safe, emotionally safe for both of us. I'm bringing the worst of me to that us. I need to manage me to bring the better parts of me to that us. And, at the end of the day, that's the message. And by the way, this is the New Testament calling us out of our old self into the new self, which we already have the new self in Christ, but not yet, because I'm still trying to work out my salvation every single day of my life. And so it's a discipline of putting on the new, putting on the new, putting on the new. And really, at the end of the day, that's what we are so grateful to the Hargraves for, their work, to help us take off our old selves and learn how to put on the new self. And every once in a while, we slip right back into the old because that thing just doesn't want to die. It resurrects every single day. We got to kill it all over again with humility and then trying to put on the new one more time. It gets easier as we grow and change. It was really hard in the beginning.
Yes.
But it's so much easier at this season. Not at this season, but it's easier because we've practiced and worked at it and worked at it. And like muscle memory, when you're building a new skill, it does get easier.
I love the word practice. The title of the book is The Mindful Marriage. And so what you're teaching us how to do is to be mindful of these patterns in ourselves. And it does take practice. I think that's a good word because, for example, I love that you talked about, actually, we don't snuff out the individual candles. They still exist. The us-ness doesn't take us over, but it takes mindfulness. So, for example, it takes mindfulness for me to say, what is an us-ness and what is this is something that's okay for me to do over here. And it actually feeds the us-ness for me to have this interest or for my spouse to have this interest over there. It actually feeds the us-ness versus when am I just saying, I'm being selfish, I don't want to do this thing, or it takes that mindfulness to really stay on top of ourselves. You lay out in the book 4 practices, essentially. Could you talk us through those a little bit?
Yeah. So the 4 steps really are in the book. It's a little bit of a workball. People are going to do exercises and they're going to put pen to paper and they're going to identify, oh, wow, this is my old reactive self. This is what I do. Wow. And then they're going to map, but what's the truth? Rooted in God, rooted in truth I'm learning about myself, about our us-ness, and how then am I going to respond differently to the same circumstance? I'm still going to get dysregulated. She's still going to do something that from time to time triggers something in me. It's my job to manage me in those moments. Not to expect her to fix it, but it's my job to manage me. And so that culminates this whole journey. This book is one journey, not chapter on this or that. It's one journey to help you identify these 4 steps. And when I know what they are, then that is my way out of dysregulation back into self-regulation or self-control so that I can put on a better me so we can deal with whatever the issue is at hand. That's in a nutshell what the journey that the book takes you on. Those 4 steps are very intentional to say out loud your old self and the new self you're trying to work into. Because you're going to love this as a clinician. The psychology of this is when you get dysregulated and go into fight or flight mode, you're in your midbrain and your prefrontal cortex isn't working anymore. And you need to turn it back on. And the 4 steps actively turns back on the better part of your brain, the part of your brain that knows what love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and goodness is. And you can say, I got to move toward that. And so you are taking mindfulness, taking back control. You're renewing yourself by renewing your mind and helping you stop being the old and start being the new. And so the 4 steps do that.
I love that. It's so practical.
It is.
Because it's not like we will ourselves to, I just need to be more loving, which is often what we try to do. We just try to will it. Like you were saying, Nan, earlier in your marriage, I'll just try to love them out of our own willpower.
So let me just give a quick example. It's me saying when I get triggered about something, for me, it often sounds like, okay, here's step 1, say what I feel. What I'm feeling is I'm feeling inadequate. Now, by the way, I used to say, I'm feeling controlled by you and you need to knock it off. See, I focused on the speck in her eye, right? Now I'm focusing on the log in my own eye. I feel inadequate because that's at the root of it. And what I usually do, Nan, with my inadequacy is I usually blame or control you in the form of make it your fault or point out the one thing in your argument that's wrong. That's what I normally do. The truth is, I might have something I need to listen to in this moment. The truth is God loves me and I'm not inadequate and I'm actually very capable of managing myself in this moment. And so, number 4, this is the key. What I'm going to do differently based on the truth is I'm going to slow my heart rate. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to listen. I'm going to try to hear what it is you're trying to share with me and put my defensiveness aside. Okay, deep breath. All right. you can go. So what I did is I talked out loud to myself and to her. I talked to myself. I told myself, get in charge of your log, Ron. Don't go into reactivity. Move in a better direction. Number 2, I talked to her out loud, and that I told her what I was doing in the moment. She's used to me being reactive right back. Mm-hmm. But when she hears me saying this, she goes, oh, Ron's putting on humility. Ron's taking charge of himself. I don't have to control him. He's controlling him. That's a good thing. It relieves her of any hook to try to jump in and do what she used to do. So now we're both on a better plane. The biggest thing it does is neurologically, it's slowing you down and reactivating your mind. We are transformed, Allison, by the renewing of our minds, because our mind renews our brain, and the brain renews the body and how we respond. And when we get the mind right, then the rest of us follows. And then I got to do it. Step 4 is, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to calm down. In this moment, my example is, I'm going to try to listen to you and put aside my defensiveness. It's the doing that helps us reinforce this. Neurologically, again, the more you do it, the more your brain gets used to the new activity rather than the old, and it replaces the old with new. That's the neuroplasticity of our minds, that we're actually able to restructure we call them neurological ruts of our brain. And literally, you're not just renewing your mind like the consciousness of your mind, you're renewing your brain structure. It is physical what happens as a result of this process. Not immediate, but over time, the more we do this, the easier and easier it gets.
When you're both doing that, you're aware. It's kind of a cue when one of you takes that first step for both of you to essentially slow yourselves down and be present to the other in a different way.
Or it could be it went off the rails and I really got dysregulated. And I may go into blame. I may go into control. And I've caught myself, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, hey, earlier, here's what was happening with me. And this is what I did. And for that, I am so sorry. That is old Nan talking. What I'm doing now is I know I had to have God speak to me, the Holy Spirit, and I needed to hear from him. And I know now that was pain. That was my abandonment talking and those old things. And I hate that I do those old things. But I'm going to move towards you. I'm going to ask for forgiveness. I'm going to move towards you. And I am going to now walk in truth. But sometimes we just get dysregulated. Yeah. And some of those things, they happen in a nanosecond.
That's right.
And those ruts can be so, so powerful. Mm-hmm. I know early on when I was in my recovery and I was putting these practices into place, I cannot tell you how many times I would get dysregulated and go, man, I could use a drink right now. And I'm 5 years down the road now, and that's the last thing that comes into my mind. And yet I still get dysregulated. It's the last thing because I feel like that rut is not there anymore. But there are others, you're peeling back the layers, And so it's a humility posture. It's this still is triggering to me. Let's talk about this. Right. And what I want to do is do this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move towards you. I'm going to trust God with it, and I'm going to come to you with it.
And Allison, what do you think happens in my heart when I hear her doing all that work out loud? I mean, it absolutely softens my heart towards her. 100%. Yeah. Like all of a sudden, instead of being on guard and all up and, holding on and dysregulation, I'm going, oh, okay, wow, beautiful. I see you working. I see in that moment her sacrificing something about her for our us-ness. Mm-hmm. That moves me toward her. That makes me want to invest in this and look in the mirror at myself. And all of a sudden, both of us are putting on humility, which softens the whole dynamic. Again, I don't want to pretty this up for people. This is a hard journey. If you've been to really hard places like we've been, this is not a turn on a dime sort of stuff. This is sludging for quite a while. Yep. But my goodness, what used to take us 2 weeks to even begin to try to deal with happens in a minute and a half at this season of our life. It's just so different.
I'm so glad you're saying this for people, because especially when we've dug those ruts internally and with our partner for a long, long time, it takes a while. They're deep.
Oh, yes.
So I love that you're saying, I just so appreciate your honesty and vulnerability, both of you, about your personal struggles and how that affects the marriage. What this picture that I get as you're describing the process, though, is like these circles where we go into our individual selves with all the reactivity, but you're coming into that us-ness circle. And it's like, that's the space where the defenses melt away. Let's come back to us. And it's us. And there's the word you keep using is humility. You talk about it a lot in the book. It just melts the ego and the pride of I got to apologize to him. It's let's go back to the us-ness space.
Right.
This is the us-ness. This is for us. I love that.
Yeah. What does Philippians 2 tell us about our Lord, who put on humility and became obedient to death, even death on a cross? And that whole section, that whole poem that Paul lays out about Jesus starts with, this is how you do your relationships. And it's like, yeah, this is how we do marriage. This is how we do friendships. This is how we do parenting. Humility says, I'm not going to rule over you. I am managing me. Did you know the Latin root word for humility is grounded? You get grounded with humility. You know who you are and what you're not. You know where you fit in the world. You know who God is and that you're not him. That sort of posturing softens my heart, and it absolutely makes it easier for her heart to soften towards me.
I want to say this because it's not perfection you're going after, because you're not going to get that. All right, in the relationship. It's not that we do these steps and then Ron never blames me for anything.
Right.
I mean, our flesh is so there in times. But when he blames me, I can go, wait a minute, this is causing me pain. And what do I normally do in my pain? I'm going to come at a truckload with you. And I'm going to go in this loop of, this is you. This is always you. You always do this to me. No, I can slow this roll down and I can say, that's shaming, and that's on you. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to receive that. But I don't have to withdraw. I don't have to control him. I don't have to beat him over the head. I don't have to do all of the stuff that's in 1 Corinthians 13, the record of wrong. I love to be an archaeological digger, and just, you've been doing this for years. Your dad did this, and on it goes. You know what I'm saying? That's my pain.
And even if it's in your own mind and it's not coming out, it's still building that rut. Yeah.
That is the pain talking. What does Nan normally do? She goes to all four of these things. No. Take a breath. Look at him as God looks at him, because that's truth. He's having a moment here. I don't know why, but I can say, you don't need to be shaming me right now. I'm not going to withdraw. I'm going to move towards you. And I'm going to listen to the truth.
That's that agency piece. He may or may not take accountability for that. Hopefully he will as time goes on. You don't need him to, because you know what's true. And
exactly.
It's so empowering.
Well, it just unhooks you from that loop and that rut that, we hear from couples all the time going, we do the same thing all the time. We do the same thing all the time. Let me tell you, there are times when he can say something and my flesh just goes, oh, here we go again. And it's just so freeing to go, wait a minute, no, I'm going to walk in truth. And I just feel a lot of freedom in that.
By the way, I just want to full circle before you ask that next question. We said earlier, we never want somebody in an abusive situation to hear us saying, just suck it up and stay.
Oh, no.
I want them to listen to what we just said. The empowerment is in recognizing what is true about me from God's point of view.
Yes.
God says you're a worthy person. That means you're not worthy of being hit or beat down or pressed upon, or whatever you're receiving in your current marriage relationship is not how God sees you. And It's not what you're worth. So God's worth empowers me to take agency, to act out of my worth. Mm-hmm. To act out of my worth, that's very important. And if I'm acting out of my worth, I'm not going to stand here and be subject to that. But at the same time, I'm not going to close myself off to the relationship or the possibilities of change or whatever. But I am going to take action so that doesn't happen anymore.
Boundaries. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's such a nuanced thing, because sometimes women who are in abusive relationships, the shame makes it hard for them to leave. And being able to kind of get to this point of going, I have to remove myself from this situation. This is unsafe for myself and my kids, comes from some of this work of turning inward and the confidence that it can give you. I have a question for you before we wind down. I appreciate your staying a little bit longer. The other kind of nuance of this that I can hear a listener in my mind wondering, what about, let's say it's not an abusive situation, it's not toxic, but one member of the couple is not willing to do their own work. One is sitting there going, I'd love to do this. I want to do this. Let me start tomorrow. But my spouse or whatever is just never gonna, they're just sedentary. They're not growing. What do you do in that situation?
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum, built for business by American Express.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 40% off select styles, plus a free professional measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
We do address that later in later chapters of the book, and it's a very important question. And let me just say, in our own journey,
both of us had seasons where we were not doing our work.
That's
sure.
right. So
For sure.
2007, when our marriage blows up, when we find ourselves in Dr. Hargrave's office, I wasn't doing any work on me. I was, she was the one who needed all the change as far as I was concerned, and that was my pride talking. And Dr. Hargrave helped me begin to go on a humility journey that it continues to this day. During the worst season of her drinking, I was every day trying to self-regulate. Every day I was trying to say, how do I put on love, joy, peace, patience, and kindness in this moment with her? I was working on me, trying to take off control and the blame stuff that I was really good at. And it was a lonely experience. What my prayer was, Lord, since I'm not doing the same dance with her anymore that I used to do, let her get tired of dancing all by herself. And I don't know how that ultimately played a role or not. I know eventually she came to the end of herself and she made some really hard, amazing decisions that brought about recovery for her. I do think I was doing what I could, managing me and staying in my lane, as she's come to say it. I love that. I needed to just stay in my lane instead of crossing into her lane. And eventually that created an environment where it was more likely that she started looking in her own mirror, doing her own work. So I'm not going to guarantee that to anybody listening, right? I wish I could. I can't guarantee that, but I do think it is the right way to respond.
And it doesn't do anything for your us-ness, if we can go back to that. That season where Ron wasn't even seen, when I would say, hey, I think this is too much. I think, what about us? Well, I'm doing this for God, and he was so into his pride. That did nothing for our us-ness. Our us-ness was stagnant, and it was very isolating, and there was not any intimacy. On the other hand, same with the season that I was in. And so there's got to be some grace there. There's got to be definite prayer on the part of the other person for that person, but ultimately it's got to be them doing the work, I truly believe, and God working in them. But once they are doing that, man, that building that bridge of trust, for us, that's been this last 5 years. And that has been a prayer every day for me, because once I came to the end of myself, boy, he wasn't having it, because, man, I had really hurt him for a decade with myself,
Again, I think it's just, you're being so real about this. Sometimes that us-ness candle is flickering and it might even be out, and that's painful and lonely. But even then, and again, we're talking about nuanced situations, but even then, if I can do my own work, stay in my own lane, I might be more able, when the other person is ready, to meet them there, if I haven't been burying my own feelings in a rut. And it's not easy. It's hard. I mean, marriage is a marathon, not a sprint. It might be a series of marathons. It's a long journey, but these are tools. I like what you're saying. These are tools that really can help you regardless of the season you're in.
Yeah, the alternative is to be reacting out of your own pain. And when you react out of pain, that just ignites their dysregulated pain and now you're in the couple pain cycle and you are stuck. When one person starts pursuing peace by self-control,
right.
It has to change something. You're not doing the same dance anymore. It has to change something
ultimately. It will
ultimately.
change the dynamic. It will.
It will. You don't know exactly when or how quickly, but it will. There is power in taking your agency.
And there might come a moment like for you, Nan, where you, out of that self-regulation, say, I'm not doing this anymore. Or where you have to say to a spouse, this isn't okay. I'm not going to leave you, but I'm not okay with this. But again, it's coming out of that self-regulated space.
That's right.
My prayer for couples is that they will do the work together and that they will do the work. I do like to tell people, don't just gloss over it and read it real quick. I mean, if you'll do the work and dig in and stay in your lane and do the work for you, but also they're doing the work and you come together and share, it's going to be beautiful. But don't do the work because you want that person to stop doing whatever they're doing or get off their phone. Don't pick up this book if you want your husband off his phone. No, it's Lord, what do you have for me? What do I need to work on so that I can bless my spouse, my significant other, and our us-ness? That's my prayer for people, but I'm not going to lie. It's some work, and I'll never forget this man that came up to us at a conference that we did, and he said, well, thanks for helping me open Pandora's box. He goes, now I'm dealing with the pain of a mother, and they had lost a daughter, and he's like, man, I had shoved that so far down. I don't want to deal with that.
And here was what I would say to him. Buddy, you have been living in light of that pain. You just don't think you have.
Yeah.
But it
So
affects you every single day.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
do
yeah.
the work.
This is an invitation to a more beautiful, vibrant flame for each of us, for the us-ness, for the people in our lives. Thank you so much for putting the work into sharing your story with us and creating this resource. Tell people the best way to find you and find the resource. We'll send some information out in the show notes as well.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
We appreciate it. Rondeal.org. Rondeal.org is our website where people can get tapped into the book. We have bonus material available there for free. And we're doing a Mindful Marriage Conference for churches where we're just talking and walking couples through this process. And so we'd love to get connected to anybody interested in that.
Yeah.
I love it. That's great. I'm so glad you're bringing these tools into church spaces again, because I do sometimes feel like we don't get the richness of what you're trying to describe here, this paradox that as we tend to our own healing, our own selves, we are nurturing that us-ness. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Best of You. It would mean so much if you take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts and click the plus or follow button. That will ensure you don't miss an episode and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave your 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.